It's a flipping health farm.
Yes, and it's pronounced Chumley's. It's very exclusive.
It wants to be an all. £800 for 3 days.
World in Action investigates the new danger of hepatitis C next.
Coronation Street is sponsored by Cadbury, the nation's favourite.
It stalks by night. It hunts without fear.
Alice, what's happening?
You mustn't be frightened. Please don't be frightened.
I'm not frightened.
It seduces its prey.
It's not you I'm scared of. It's me.
It kills without feeling. Wilderness, spine-tingling drama tonight on Yorkshire.
I'm an ordinary housewife and mother. I've dragged a J-cloth over my surfaces and plumped my Chesterfield, but I'm at my tether's end, dinner-wise. But wait, tucked behind my black bean sauce, in between the cayenne and the vanilla pods, is my salvation. Bisto. I add a splash to some sausages, chops, or even a burger, and Bob's your in-law, a fulfilling family meal for any family with a family to feed. That's altogether a better idea than doing something out of a book with giblets.
This is the captain of your ship, calling. It's time to get a snack on board, and no stalling. And if you haven't guessed, this is what we'd suggest.
Muller rice, a satisfying blend of cool, light dairy rice with a delicious serving of fruit. Eat a Muller rice and give hunger the heave-ho.
From Muller, who else?
An undercover operation, but the tables have turned.
I'm the person holding your policeman.
No time for negotiations.
I need proof he's still alive.
You just killed him.
Trouble with the sweet stuff, oh yeah, I got it. Trouble with the sweet stuff, oh yeah, and I'm never gonna take it.
A new series of Thief Takers, Thursday at 9 on Yorkshire.
Now, World in Action investigates the new danger of hepatitis C and how infected blood got into the system.
First there was HIV and AIDS. Now there's a new virus, hepatitis C. Transmitted in the blood, its effects can be deadly.
400,000 people in the UK have got hepatitis C and they don't know about it.
In a way, we've had our life. There's nothing that can be done for us. We've got the virus and we can't get rid of it.
I didn't know what was wrong with me. My doctor said that it was just my imagination.
I mean, a habit could be got rid of, a drug habit, but a disease is virtually impossible to get rid of.
I took a risk and it came back to get me.
They all have one thing in common, the virus hepatitis C. Just 6 years ago, it didn't even have a name. Until recently, there was no treatment. Thousands of people, even now, are unaware they have the disease. Doctors now know how some of them were infected. Intravenous drug users are most at risk. Haemophiliacs and transfusion patients have also been exposed to the virus. For others, the cause remains a mystery. Unlike HIV, the virus can survive outside the body. This makes it difficult to discover why many more people have got the disease. It could be something as mundane as sharing a toothbrush.
I don't think anyone can afford to be complacent about it. There are an enormous number of people who could have had some exposure to this virus. This might be called the everyman's AIDS.
Sufferers say they're being ignored. Scientists want more research. But can the NHS deliver? Tonight, World in Action asks, are we prepared for the consequences of tainted blood?
The majority of people who are infected have no symptoms and won't know that they're carrying the virus. And only after 20 or 30 years, or perhaps even longer, will they start to get symptoms of liver disease.
Many sufferers find it difficult to convince doctors they are ill. Early symptoms may be nothing more than tiredness and reduced appetite. The disease is unpredictable. Not all carriers will go on to develop serious liver damage.
1 out of 5 of our patients at diagnosis already have cirrhosis, which is this nodular change in the liver. You can see here. The problem with cirrhosis is that the blood doesn't pass through this hard liver properly, so you get a build-up of pressure in the blood vessels in the intestines, and some of these may bleed.
1/3 of all Britain's liver transplants are now carried out because of the serious damage caused by hepatitis C. It's such a new disease, scientists still don't know why some carriers go on to develop cirrhosis and others don't. For an unknown number, the condition will develop into fatal liver cancer.
I think the average hepatologist in the United Kingdom will see perhaps 4 or 5 new patients per week in his clinic. That's certainly true here at St. Mary's. So countrywide, there are large numbers of patients coming to our attention.
Monica Powell's family suffers from haemophilia. To prevent uncontrolled bleeding, they need a substance called factor VIII, which helps their blood to clot.
Is that what you were going to say?
For brothers Brian and Ron, it proved to be the cure that killed.
They'd done ordinary jobs, and being haemophiliacs didn't affect them as such. So they didn't have blood products until later on in life. My elder brother, he had a hip replacement, 1978, 79, and he had factor VIII then. My second brother, he had factor VIII in 1984.
The factor VIII they were given was contaminated with hepatitis C. Some haemophiliacs have to be given factor VIII several times a week. Brian and Ron's haemophilia was not severe. They only needed it when they had their operations. That was enough. The virus was introduced to their bodies. Years later, it would kill.
He felt as if he'd got sort of a tummy bug. His tummy felt a bit squeezy. He got up to go to the toilet, and all of a sudden he just hemorrhaged badly, all over everywhere. Ron was conscious at the time, but he was in a dreadful distress condition.
A single dose of factor VIII is made by concentrating the clotting agent from thousands of blood donations. In 1975, World in Action first exposed how American down-and-outs were contaminating Britain's blood products.
Tonight, World in Action investigates the health risk to Britain's haemophiliacs from the men who sell their blood in America. Much of it is bought from men who need money badly, like those down here on the skid rows of America's big cities. But paid donors carry 6 to 13 times the risk of having hepatitis as volunteer donors, and they can pass it on.
Pardon me? For the questions that they ask you in there before you give plasma, do you always answer them truthfully?
Are you going to tell them?
No.
No, you're not. It's not, you know. Yeah, most of the time.
Shortly after that program was broadcast, Ron's brother Brian was also infected with hepatitis C. By 1994, tests showed he too was dying.
The whole family were devastated because they couldn't believe that they hadn't been told earlier.
Many similarities have been drawn between HIV and hepatitis C. They're both transmitted in blood and blood products like factor VIII. In 1990, the full effects of hepatitis C were not yet known. But HIV-positive haemophiliacs were dying of AIDS at the rate of 1 a week. Public opinion forced the government to set up a multi-million-pound compensation fund.
Today's announcement shows an extraordinary change of heart by the government.
I'm now able to tell the House that the government has been examining this matter and has been able to agree in principle to proposals put forward by the plaintiff's lawyers.
The compensation only covered HIV victims infected before 1985. After that, all Factor VIII was heat-treated, reducing the risk of viral contamination. Now, the 3,000 haemophiliacs who were infected with hepatitis C from the same contaminated blood products want compensation too. Today, the government turned them down.
But at the end of the day, I have to say, is it better to spend money on healthcare, direct patient care, for haemophiliacs with hepatitis C, or indeed anybody else who is ill, rather than compensation?
Monica can't understand the government's attitude. Like her brothers, she too was infected with hepatitis C from Factor VIII during a minor operation. Her case is unusual. The health authority admitted liability and paid compensation.
I think that documentary should be shown again, and all the government should be made to watch it and see exactly where those blood products came from. They should do exactly the same as they did for the haemophiliacs with HIV. Exactly the same.
All the haemophiliacs contracted hepatitis C as a result of receiving Factor VIII through the NHS.
Yes, but they're kept alive.
3,000 of them.
Yes, indeed, that is indeed the case.
For a period, and now they're dying.
Yes. Remember, they are alive, first of all. I mean, they have the gift of life from the blood products they received. And in addition, some of them have indeed got hepatitis C. But first of all, they are alive. And secondly, the onset of hepatitis C, while very severe in the case of probably 1 in 5, undoubtedly, indeed leading to cirrhosis of the liver and death, in many others is not so severe. So let's look at it in perspective.
The Haemophilia Society will continue to fight for compensation. They're now joined by another group of people also infected with hepatitis C, patients who've been given contaminated blood transfusions. Because blood for transfusions isn't pooled, the risk of viral infection is greatly reduced. However, until 1991, when screening of blood for hepatitis C began, there was a chance of contracting the disease.
November 1975, I went out for a night out with my husband, and we literally never came back. We had a really bad road accident in Paisley in Scotland. My husband was killed and I was on the critical list, in a coma for about 5-6 days.
Reese survived after major surgery, blood transfusions and several weeks of intensive care. But 16 years later, she discovered the legacy of that life-saving treatment.
I didn't know what was wrong with me. My doctor said that it was just my imagination, until one Sunday afternoon I was in the village and the blood transfusion people were taking blood, and I thought, they've been really good. They saved my life. They gave me plasma blood after the road accident.
Her donated blood went through the new screening process, and the hepatitis C virus was detected. But no one explained what that meant.
For the first 6 months that I had it, I thought I wasn't going to cease. I thought I was going to have liver cancer and I was going to die.
Their GP will either not know about hepatitis C as against the other viral hepatitis diseases, won't really understand what might be available in the way of treatment, possibly won't perform the correct diagnostic tests, and in all likelihood won't send someone to a specialist centre.
Since 1991, we've had guidance setting out the sort of way in which Hep C, potential Hep C sufferers should be treated. That they should, for example, be offered tests, should be offered counselling. We reinforced that only last year. The Chief Medical Officer reinforced that only last year.
A fold of skin is then pinched up.
At the moment, the only treatment available for hepatitis C is a drug called interferon. Patients inject themselves 3 times a week to try and prevent the virus multiplying.
Interferon alpha is the drug that we use. It needs to be given for a period of a year. It's given by injection. And only 1 out of 5 patients treated for a year are cured. The other 4 out of 5 will derive benefit while they're on the interferon, but the virus will come back when we stop treatment.
Doctors recommend that interferon should be given before the virus gets a chance to cause any serious liver damage. But a year's treatment costs around £4,000. Many patients say they've found it difficult to get the drug prescribed on the National Health Service.
I started in 1992 and it took me to 1996 to get it. Every month I went and they just said, no money, government have not given us finances to do it. Come back in 3 months and we'll help again.
We know that some health authorities will pay for treatment for people with hepatitis C. Others will pay for instance, the first 50 cases that come through their door in a financial year.
It's now known how haemophiliacs and transfusion patients were infected by hepatitis C. It was also suspected that drug users were at risk, but until recently, no one realised the full extent of the problem.
I'm the clinical coordinator here. Now you've come to see us today because one of your ex-friends has...
Investigations began in a quiet East Anglian town and led back to the swinging 60s.
I noticed that some of our injection users at times were considerably lacking in energy, and some of them, to me, seemed to be slightly jaundiced.
Bury St Edmunds has one of the lowest HIV rates in the country, but analysis of samples taken from local drug users showed that 60% were hepatitis C positive. National follow-up studies painted a similar picture.
People who were in their teens or 20s, in the 60s, experimented with all sorts of new aspects of life, and one thing was intravenous drugs, and I think significant numbers of people were infected as a result of experimenting. These are not people who've had long-term usage of drugs usually. They may have used it on 1 or 2 occasions.
I'm certainly being contacted by people who are, say, in their 50s, and, you know, yeah, they did it when they were 20, and it was just a digression. It may have been something they just tried once at a party, but once is enough if you've come in contact with the virus.
1969, rock festival's Flower Power. It all summed up the mood of a generation. Rules were there to be broken. Drugs were inevitably part of the scene.
The music was good. Obviously, I was into music myself. I played in a semi-pro band. I used to mess about that way. That's what got me into the drug scene. People would be that possibly out of it on something else and say, well, do you fancy trying this, you know, maybe a bit of heroin or a crushed up morphine tablet, you know.
If there were a lot of syringes and hypodermics about that might have come from a burgled chemist, then we all had lots of clean equipment, but that was the only time we had lots of clean equipment. There were no needle exchanges then.
We treat the needles at that time just like passing a joint round, basically, or a reefer, you know.
There were always some people who never shared, just because they didn't. It was their own set of rules. But I would say, when I was using it, the majority of people weren't that bothered, I don't think.
But you thought you got away with it?
Most definitely, yes. I thought, well, that's it now. I shrugged my habit off, leading a clean life now and all the rest of it. And now I feel as if I'm almost in the same boat as the HIV people.
I had a couple of HIV tests, thinking, you know, well, I got out in 1983, 1984, you never know. So I had a couple of HIV tests, which, of course, were negative. And so once I'd assured myself that HIV was negative, I settled down to get on with life and forget about it, really.
So what was it like for your past to suddenly catch up with you?
Frightening. It dredged up an awful lot of ghosts, I suppose. But frightening more than anything.
Now I'm sort of living in bedsit land, just getting along on state benefits. If I had my health now, I'd be straight back into my career.
I've 2 years left to do of a degree, and then I intend to go into the job market, have a career possibly in drug counselling. 2 lovely children, just good positive outlook.
Do you worry that hepatitis C might prevent that?
I suppose it's a possibility, but it's a possibility I'm not willing to look at unless it becomes a reality.
Needle sharing by drug users is now established as the main source of hepatitis C infection in Britain. But that doesn't account for all the new cases. The question of exactly how thousands of others got the disease has yet to be solved.
Not everybody who has hepatitis C is or has used drugs, because half of the patients that I see in the clinic give no history of this behaviour. And in this group, we assume that they've either contracted it through sexual contact, perhaps sharing toothbrushes, a variety of other procedures which can result in contamination of blood.
The Highland Donor Centre in downtown Los Angeles is...
Some things have changed since World in Action first drew attention to the problem of contaminated blood supplies. Blood products which are less likely to transmit viral infections have been produced. Genetic engineering has made a new, even safer factor VIII, known as recombinant. But it's expensive, and most British hospitals can't afford to use it. Some things have remained the same.
Not yet, but I'm learning.
You're learning?
Yeah.
So when do you think you're going to be able to do it yourself?
This summer, echoes of the past came back to haunt young haemophiliacs at Manchester Children's Hospital. Here, most are given cheaper blood-derived factor VIII. It had to be withdrawn after 3 children contracted hepatitis A, the less dangerous cousin of hepatitis C.
Whilst we were on holiday, we were informed by a policeman at the door not to use the treatment that we were on because there was a risk that it was infected with hepatitis A. Now that suddenly devastated our lives to the degree that we were unsure about the treatment we were injecting into our children.
Within days of that incident, the National Blood Products Laboratory in Elstree also had to recall batches of factor VIII. This time, traces of hepatitis C were found. Both withdrawals were claimed to be precautionary. No risk was posed. But haemophiliacs and their families weren't reassured.
They need to get on with their lives of enough, dealing with the haemophilia and what that brings to them, without worrying what's in the injection and what's going to happen next.
Some factor VIII had to be withdrawn the other day.
Yes, but that was for different reasons.
Because there were traces of hepatitis C in it.
Yes, and that was as a safety precaution. There was traces in the pool, but not, of course, it hadn't yet received the treatment which would eliminate it. So it was, if you like, a double safety check.
Linda's son Jack decided he wasn't prepared to take the risk of using potentially contaminated products.
I decided to refuse treatment. So I had to stop in and not go out. I normally play a game of football or have some fun with my friends. But once the scare came on, I decided to refuse treatment and I had to make a sacrifice and stay in.
We have no definite evidence that the hepatitis A is implicated. But of course, the impression of the families is a different one. When you're dealing with a patient population who've been the innocent bystanders of viral infections in the past, I personally, as a haemophilia director, think there's an extremely good case for them to be given something which is potentially a lot safer, because it's not of human origin.
Myself and my husband couldn't condone refusing treatment. I couldn't put his life at risk by having a major bleed. But on the other hand, you know, Jack's got a decision to make here as well. It wasn't just up to myself.
Jack's refusal to take human-derived factor VIII gave the hospital little choice, either seeing their patient bleed or giving in to his demand for the safer product. It's double the cost of his treatment. Jack got what he wanted, but his friend Tim and 90 other haemophiliac children at the same hospital have to go without recombinant treatment. Local health authorities say they can't afford it. Parents want the government to pay.
Local clinicians should decide whether someone needs the new recombinant factor VIII, or whether the existing one is satisfactory, recognising that the new one is more expensive and therefore somebody else may not get treatment, somebody who's dying of cancer, for example, may not get the treatment they require.
Viral diseases can be an enormous problem, and we, especially when we don't have good treatments for them, don't actually know how to resource them properly. And when there's a big resourcing problem, there is a certain head in the sand feel about how we should perhaps deal with them.
Every year, the Department of Health spends £26 million on research into HIV and AIDS. So far, just £1 million has been pledged towards researching the hepatitis C epidemic, which scientists believe could affect more than 10 times as many people. The government say the scale of the problem has yet to be fully assessed.
Speculation, it is just that at this stage.
Well, these are doctors.
Yes, but as we've seen over CJD and BSc, you know, experts are not always right.
They're clinicians, they're doctors, they're liver specialists.
Sure.
Don't you believe them?
I take the view that we must see what's happening on the ground floor. Of course, we're monitoring the situation very carefully. But at the moment, we're not talking about those sort of numbers. We're talking about an increase, certainly, but a small increase. Let's watch what happens. It is a very difficult situation, undoubtedly. We want to monitor it carefully, and we will do that. We are doing that.
There's no doubt that the resources are needed to treat patients with HIV. This is a more acute condition. Patients have severe illness, which is life-threatening. So we're not arguing to divert funds, but we feel that the patient with hepatitis C is equally deserving. Just because it takes a longer time frame for him to develop symptomatic disease doesn't mean it's any less serious.
Well, there's an awful lot of people that haven't been diagnosed, and it's up to us, the government, our society, to get as many people diagnosed, to inform them what they've got, to support them, to educate them, to treat them.
If you would like a fact sheet, please send a stamped addressed envelope to the British Liver Trust, P.O. Box 900, Ipswich, IP3 9QW.